Daniel Carter sat at the kitchen table, half listening to the faint hum of morning radio while scrolling through unread emails on his phone. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, but he barely noticed. His mind was already at the office, tackling the pile of work that awaited him. Across from him, Emily Carter watched, her fingers curled around a mug, warmth radiating into her hands, though she felt none of it inside. "You're going in early again?" she asked, forcing lightness into her tone. Daniel barely looked up. "Yeah, big client meeting. Can't risk anything slipping through the cracks." Emily exhaled slowly, steadying herself. "It's just, you promised we'd have breakfast together today." Was. Daniel glanced at the untouched plate of eggs she had prepared. "I'm sorry, Em. I forgot." He stood, drained his coffee in a single gulp, and kissed the top of her head, a habitual thoughtless gesture. "I'll make it up to you." Emily nodded, but the hollowness in his words echoed louder than the promise itself. He had said the same thing yesterday and the day before. She watched him grab his briefcase and disappear through the front door, leaving behind a silence far heavier than his presence. The morning continued in a blur. After dropping their 10-year-old daughter Sophie off at school, Emily found herself at a small cafe downtown, stirring a cappuccino she had no intention of drinking. The quiet buzz of conversation around her felt distant, like an insulated world she could see but not touch. Emily Carter. The familiar voice sent a ripple through her. Looking up, she met the warm gaze of Liam Hayes, a name she hadn't spoken in years. He stood before her, older, but with the same easy charm that had once made him unforgettable. "Liam," she breathed, surprised. "It's been forever." He smiled, pulling out the chair opposite hers without waiting for an invitation. "More than a decade. But who's counting?" She let out a small laugh, the first genuine one in weeks. "What are you doing here?" "Business," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "But forget that. What about you? How's life treating you?" Emily hesitated. There was a time when she would have answered without thinking, filling him in on all the happy milestones. But now, what was there to say? That she felt invisible in her own home. That the man she married had become a shadow too preoccupied to notice hers. "It's good," she settled on, forcing a smile. Liam raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. That didn't sound too convincing. She exhaled, shaking her head. "It's just marriage, kids, life. You know how it is." He nodded. "I do." Then, with a knowing look, he added, "But sometimes people just need someone who actually listens." The weight of his words settled between them. Emily felt something inside her shift, just slightly, just enough. She had spent years longing for someone to hear her, to really see her. And here was Liam, offering that without expectation, without distraction. They talked for over an hour, slipping into the easy rhythm of old friends. It was effortless, comforting, dangerously familiar. When she finally glanced at her watch, she realized she was late picking up Sophie. "I should go," she said, standing quickly. Liam rose with her. "It was good seeing you, Em." She hesitated, then nodded. "You too." As she walked away, her heart pounded. Just a little too fast, just a little too hard. It was nothing, she told herself. A harmless conversation. And yet, for the first time in years, she felt something. And that, more than anything, terrified her. Outside, the autumn wind bit against her skin, but the cold wasn't what made her shiver. Emily sat in the car outside Sophie's school, gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. Her mind was still tangled in the unexpected encounter with Liam, replaying the warmth in his voice and the way he had looked at her. Not through her like Daniel did, but at her, as though she mattered. She knew she was being foolish, letting nostalgia cloud her judgment, but the feeling was intoxicating in its own way. The car door opened, jolting her back to reality as Sophie climbed in. "Hey, Mom," she chirped, slinging her backpack onto the seat. "Guess what? We're starting a new art project tomorrow. It's gonna be huge." Emily forced a smile. "That sounds exciting, sweetheart." Sophie prattled on about her day. her words tumbling over each other in excitement. Emily tried to focus, nodding and responding in the right places, but her thoughts kept drifting. Guilt gnawed at the edges of her mind. Why did she feel so restless, so dissatisfied? That night, as she stood at the sink washing dishes, Daniel finally came home. The front door clicked shut, and his footsteps echoed down the hallway. He walked into the kitchen, loosening his tie, exhaustion written across his face. "Long day?" she asked, her voice neutral. "The usual," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "Clients, deadlines, meetings that could have been emails." Emily turned off the faucet and wiped her hands. "You missed dinner. Again." Daniel sighed, looking at the untouched plate she had left for him. "I know. I'm sorry." She studied him, searching for something. Guilt, regret, maybe even the man she used to know. But all she saw was fatigue, a weary resignation that had become their new normal. "You're always sorry," she said quietly, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Daniel hesitated. "Emily, I'm trying. Work is just—" "I know," she cut in, a bitter smile forming. "It's important." Silence settled between them like a thick fog. Daniel stepped closer, brushing a hand over her shoulder. It was meant to be comforting, but it felt more like an obligation than affection. She swallowed hard, suddenly overwhelmed by the hollowness in her chest. "I'm going to bed," she murmured, pulling away. Daniel watched her go, his mouth opening as if to say something, but no words came. He simply stood there, staring at the empty space she left behind. Lying in bed later, Emily stared at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic ticking of the clock. Daniel had joined her briefly before rolling over, lost in his own exhaustion. She should have been used to it by now, the absence within their presence, but tonight it felt unbearable. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Heart pounding, she reached for it. A message from Liam. "Was really good seeing you today. Hope you're doing okay." Emily hesitated, then typed back before she could overthink it. "You too. It was nice to talk to someone who actually listens." A moment later, 3 dots appeared on the screen. "I meant what I said, You deserve to be heard." Her breath hitched. She clutched the phone, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Every rational part of her screamed to stop, to put the phone away, to forget how good it felt to be noticed. But another part, a deeper, lonelier part, whispered that maybe, just maybe, she didn't want to. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she placed the phone face down on the nightstand, but sleep never came easily that night. And for the first time in years, she wasn't sure if she wanted it to. The afternoon sun bled through the cafe's large windows, casting long shadows on the wooden floors. Emily sat at a corner table, stirring her coffee absently, watching the swirl of cream dissolve into darkness. She knew she shouldn't be here. Yet here she was. The text exchange from the night before lingered in her thoughts. She had told herself it meant nothing, just a few harmless words between old friends. But deep down, she understood the weight of what had been set into motion. Across from her, Liam leaned back in his chair, watching her with an easy confidence that unnerved her. "You look like you're second-guessing this," he noted, sipping his espresso. Emily exhaled, setting her spoon down. "Because I am." A slow smile touched his lips. "Why?" "Because I'm married," she said, forcing herself to meet his gaze. Liam tilted his head slightly. "And are you happy?" The question hung between them, too heavy to dismiss, too dangerous to answer. Emily's fingers tightened around her cup. "I don't know," she admitted. Liam studied her, his expression unreadable. Then he leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "I'm not trying to make this harder for you, Em. I just see you. And I don't think Daniel does anymore." The truth in his words stung more than she wanted to admit. She had spent years convincing herself that this was normal, that distance, neglect, and routine were inevitable in marriage. But Liam's presence, his attention, made her question everything. She needed air. "I should go," she said, pushing her chair back. Liam didn't try to stop her. He simply nodded, his eyes lingering on her as she grabbed her coat. I meant what I said. You deserve more than just being someone's afterthought. Emily swallowed, then turned and walked out before she did something she couldn't take back. That night, Daniel came home earlier than usual. The sound of his keys in the lock sent a jolt of surprise through Emily. He found her in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, and leaned against the counter, watching her. "You're home early," she said, not looking up. "Thought I'd surprise you," he replied. There was something different in his tone, an effort, however small, that she hadn't heard in a long time. She set the knife down. "Everything okay?" He hesitated, then sighed. "I know I've been distant, Em. Work has been consuming. But I don't want you to feel like I don't care." A lump formed in her throat. The timing was almost cruel. Just hours ago, she had been sitting across from another man, feeling seen in a way she hadn't in years. And now Daniel was here, offering the very thing she had been longing for. But was it too late? "I miss you," he added, reaching for her hand. His touch was warm, familiar yet unfamiliar all at once. "Can we fix this?" Emily wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that this moment wasn't too little, too late. But doubt, like an unshakable shadow, clung to her. Instead of answering, she gave him a small, hesitant nod. "Let's try." But even as she said the words, Liam's voice echoed in her mind. "You deserve more than just being someone's afterthought." And she wasn't sure which version of herself she believed anymore.